But it's an honor to be here at this symposium, and Deanna, all your work, and Brenda in putting this together, and your assistant Doreen, and Marlene, and everybody who put it together. And those meetings were really great. I missed one, and the next time I showed up, they said, "Oh, you're doing the keynote address." So I said, so I didn't miss another meeting after that. They gave me a topic, best practices in parish ministries, and I went, I can't do that. They said, why? I said, I only know really my ministry. And they didn't know either. I have an aversion to when I hear best practices and evidence-based. You know, I'm from Philly, and when we hear practice, we think of Allen Iverson as practice. You know, it's practice. Let's show up for the real thing, you know? So, and sometimes, like, we beat ourselves up when we have programs that come in, like, why didn't this program work and why didn't this work? Because programs look nice on paper, but it's really not programs that are successful. It's people who are successful. And in my experience, when dealing with human beings, we need to remove anything that gets in the way of heart-to-heart communication between the persons gathered. We cannot let a program, a toolkit, or an evidence-based best practice become more important than the person sitting in front of us. And by the end of my sharing, hopefully you will understand what I'm talking about and why I believe this and why I feel as I do. Again, programs don't change people. God changes people. People change people. The method is always secondary to the agent. In my early training and educational experience, the thing that transformed me most was a course. It wasn't really a course, it was an MDiv seminar. It was a seminar, and it was very similar to what they call CPE, Clinical Pastoral Education. And most priests have gone through this, or a lot of priests have gone through that. But what it is how I experienced. There were 6 of us. We all went to a hospital. We were chaplains for a day, and one day a week. You go in, you see a patient, and you have to write a verbatim on it, like what do you feel going in, what was it like, what was your encounter like, what did you share? And with that stuff, then you had to write it all down, and you had to present it to the class, and they went over it. And it wasn't about like, oh, maybe you should have said that, maybe you should have said that. No, you went in there with your tail between your legs because you knew. It wasn't about anything you said or didn't say. It was about your issues. What got in the way of you allowing them to explore their feelings? So if you went in the room and a person says, you say, how you doing today? And they say, I was just diagnosed with cancer. And you say to them, so you think the Eagles are going to win the Super Bowl again? And, or you think the Giants are going to end up in last place again? Hey, isn't this still South Jersey? You know, come on. But when we say those things, what we're doing really is blocking them from sharing. We're saying, what you're saying, I can't handle, so I'm going to deflect it to something I'm more comfortable with. And so that is where it all begins. That is where any program that we're going to do begins with the self, the person. We have to make sure that we know and are comfortable with ourselves before we attempt to do any program that is going to help an individual out. So what I hope to do today is to assist you in doing the greatest thing you could do for anyone you wish to help in the future, and that is to deal with and help yourself first. That is the reason why I entitled the talk, Responding to the Opioid Epidemic, the Gift of Self and of Service. My belief is that unless we deal with our own issues, struggles, emotions, and relationships, there is a possibility that we are not being as effective as we can in assisting others in dealing with their issues. Therefore, what I believe is most important before we embark on doing a program is to get in touch with who I am before we attempt to help others. I'd like to share a little bit of my journey of getting to know who I am, my strength, experience, and hope. I was born in 1964. In South Philadelphia, a mostly Italian Catholic neighborhood. I went to Catholic school. I thought everybody went to Catholic school until we saw those public kids and said, where did they come from? You know, most of our parents were blue collar, lower middle class. Outside of school, we played sports and interacted with each other. We didn't have cell phones, thank God. We were no strangers to street fights, to sexual predators, to drug dealers, and organized, and yes, I'm from Philadelphia, so unorganized crime. It was an education in addition to an education. If one excelled in making it through, you were said to have street smarts, which was different than book smarts. Now, the corner I grew up with was very popular at that time, was probably one of the biggest drug dealing corners in South Philadelphia. There were 2 luncheonettes on the corners with pinball machines and pool tables. There was a water ice and pretzel stand on the other, and there was a synagogue on the other corner, left over from when the neighborhood had a lot of Jewish population. And I was lucky because I got a job there shutting the lights on Fridays and opening them. That was 50 cents every time. So that was good. It was an easy job. But we had our own drug dealer on the corner. He was one of our neighbors. He was friendly. He was popular. And there was no entertainment better than just sitting on the step in the summer or any time and watching the cast of characters that came through. Who was high, who was drunk, who was fighting, what corners coming, what golf clubs, and we had to go get our golf clubs and our baseball bats and chase them out. One day, the guy's mother came out with a broom and chased a whole corner out of the. I said, "Wow, man, Italian mothers, don't mess with them, all right?" So. It was crazy, and then there was a car parked on the corner, and he had a license plate, and it's under the numbers it said dealer, and I thought that was such an innovative thing. I mean, because if I was walking down the street and I wanted drugs, I'd go yo, it's like the ice cream man. That's what I thought. It wasn't until I was 37 that I knew it. They sold cars, so that's the kind of neighborhood I grew up. At the age of 14, I began working at a corner drugstore a few weeks before I started high school. Hence, I started my third education, the business smarts, which I never really caught on. It was there that I began to see more up close the effects of drug and alcohol addiction, whether it was customers coming in with phony prescriptions or being approached on the streets by people asking me to try to get them something from the back. And they'd come in, and back time it was Quaaludes were big, and they'd go, yo, you got any lemons back there? And I'd be like, oh, man. And they were my cousins coming in, too. So as the years progressed, so did the addiction of some of my close friends. Watching it firsthand, this play out, I also struggled with using myself and discernment of whether or not to be a drug dealer. It was lucrative. I was blessed to have a religious brother as a teacher my junior year in high school who noticed the changes in my behavior and my performance and subsequently took the time to counsel me and help me in my own life. When I could have gone down a different road. He made such an impact on me that I wanted to be like him. A year out of high school, I joined this religious community and began my studies for the priesthood. I majored in psychology. I did a counseling internship at the very high school I attended. 3.5 years later, they thought I was a freshman. I said I wanted to work with the guys with drug addiction. He handed me a list of 5 students, 1 senior, 2 juniors, and 2 sophomores. He said, let me know if after working with these 5 guys, if you still want to work with addicts by June. And I was blessed because this principal and another priest of that order were recovering alcoholics. And we started a little program where if the principal believed that as a Catholic school, we had a greater responsibility to our troubled students who acted out behaviorally or used drugs and alcohol. So he said, we are not throwing them out. I don't care what they do. We used to take them to meetings, we used to give them rehabs, and the faculty hated it. But me, this other priest, and a few others really liked it. We got into it. So we would spend a lot more time with these kids and help them in the programs. So when June came, he said, do you still going to work with them? I went, yeah. He went, you're crazy. I said, all right, but we did it, and then the whole next year we did it, and I taught religion, or I tried to teach religion to sophomore, and that didn't work out. I had 50 kids in one class. They used to do the wave. I mean, it was like, it was crazy. They're not allowed to have 50 kids in one classroom anymore, you know? They got 10 students and 3 teacher aides. I'm like, you know? So when I worked full-time, it was good. I also worked in the counseling department, and we continued to help get these kids, helping get them in rehab. And one time, I was really upset because this kid went in rehab twice 1 year, and he was doing cocaine again. I went, I can't believe him. I said, he's doing drugs again. Like, he's supposed to stop. We helped him. We took him to meetings. They start laughing. They said, do you think that we do this to stop them from using drugs at 16 and 17? He said, no. We do this because what we're doing is sowing the seeds for when they really want to help. They'll know who to go to, what meetings to go to. They'll know that there's hope, that they heard it before in a meeting that they went to a long time ago. So the light bulbs went off, and I remembered that. And so at the end of the year, unfortunately, the faculty had the principal fired, and I left to go study theology. But after 2 years of studying theology, I decided to take a leave of absence from religious life and for the priesthood. I began another master's degree program in counseling and addictions field, and I worked straight for rehabs and detoxes and psych units and everything else. Then going past, I was ordained in 2000. I took another leave of absence. I really got kicked out, but I'm trying to say the bishops are gone. But, and I went to Florida for a few years, working again in the recovery industry, and worked with those people with addictions. And it's interesting because when I first went to Florida, one of the jobs I got was with this large sober living facility. And on Friday evenings, they would all come around the pool to introduce the new people. They had to jump in the pool and the new employees. And so I introduced myself as the new director of organizational development for the place. This was in 2004. The year I taught at Newman was 1987. And so as I was going around the pool and introducing myself, and I'm looking at the faces that are there, a lot of guys that I sent there, and talking about when I started working in the high school and taking kids to meetings, that was 17 years ago. I was counting how many of them were around the pool that day. There were 8 of them. 8 guys that we take were 17 years later are getting help. And that's when I realized it works. Sowing those seeds is so important. And it really was something that, and even out of those 5 guys, there was one of the 5 was there. Unfortunately, since the 5, 3 of the 5, I buried 3 of them. Their pictures you saw in those videos. They were the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th face that you saw. And I'm the godfather to one of their sons. And so those slides were very personal to me because those faces were faces of all funerals that I did of people that I knew. So it is personal. So as I reflect upon the 30-plus years since I started working with people with addiction, I realize I find my thoughts turn more often to those people who didn't make it than to the people that are doing well, to the people who could not shed the demons of addiction. But I talked to many men and women who I've known over the years, some who still struggle, some who are in recovery for multiple years, and many who are in various stages in between. Our conversations seemed to center around the things that they attribute to most of the progress that they had made on the journey. And it always comes back to this, the relationships that they made in this program. The variable that had the most impact were the people who helped them along the way, the relationships they developed, and the bonds that keep them together. Secondly, when they speak of what keeps them clean and sober, it is always prayer and a daily conscious contact with God. So one of the things I learned is that it's not about the person who has it together helping the person who doesn't. It's about the brokenness in each one of us that helps the other heal in order to become a whole. So recognizing our brokenness helps to identify the brokenness in others. So part of our journey as we want to do this is we need to accept and understand our own brokenness. If not, we kind of get lost and we could get sucked into many things, and I'll talk about that. But throughout my life, I had to accept that I wasn't as together as I would have liked to be, or I thought I was. I thought I had it together. Until people go, no, you're crazy. I'm like, okay. So, but being broken came early in my life in many ways. And that brokenness manifests itself through my actions and behaviors, my impulses and emotions that were counterproductive to a healthy lifestyle. But through this struggle, I was able to identify with those who felt alienated, isolated, shame-based, fearful, insecure, and mistrustful. From an early age, I felt more comfortable with people on the periphery than I did with those so-called goody two-shoes. But there was a price to pay. In 8th grade, the good sisters told me not to hang out with the people I was hanging with, and they tried to get me to go to a prep school. I had good grades, except conduct. My conduct was always my lowest grade. So but I decided to go with my friends. I wanted to go where they were going. But I had the highest average in math. I had straight hundreds across the board. But night graduation, I didn't get the math award. Now, I knew I had the highest average in math because I stole the nun's roll book to check, just to make sure, all right? I put it back, no fingerprints. But when I went up to her and said, yo, so I didn't get the math, I had the highest average. She went, well, I don't want to do her voice and everything because it gets too much. She said, well, Mr. Stabeno, I can't help myself, though. She said, I wanted to give it to somebody who would amount to something in life, and you, Mr. Stabeno, will never amount to anything. They were so good for building up self-esteem. It was like, And the principal was at earshot, and she called me over and she said, well, I don't think she meant that. I think she meant that you need to consider hanging out with different people, all right? Like the good kids. I'm like, they're boring. But, so what I realized, a discovery of self, rooted in faith in a higher power, necessitates sharing the joy that cannot be contained or hidden. It means that which heals us, we can share with other people and offer hope. So once we get through our pain, once we get to the other side, accept it, there's a brightness about us that people who are in darkness are attracted to. And one of the things that my religion teacher did was he turned me on to different scriptures. The parable of the lost sheep, the prodigal son, the tax collector, the woman caught in adultery, Joseph the dreamer. And all those passages, I discovered that God loved people who other people thought were wasteful. And so then I thought that even I could be lovable in God's sight. They were the feeble beginnings of my repairing my woundedness. And through years of spiritual direction, therapy, groups, 12-step meetings, I am always continuing to accept who I am with my imperfections and flaws. Seeing others in dark places, calls me to share my experience and the hope that there is light. Being a lamp on a hill, Jesus talks about that often. And I want to talk a little bit more about that. See, because it's not about a magical formula or a comprehensive toolkit or a perfect program. It's about people on a journey. And this journey begins with oneself. It is one who is seeking and one who is searching. The power of one addict helping another is without parallel. It says it plainly in the big books of Alcoholics Anonymous. It isn't rocket science. However, one doesn't have to be an addict to help an addict. Addicts aren't pathetic people who need pity. They are humans who need the love of other humans to help them feel the love of God and begin to have hope. In my family group, people are not permitted to speak in the second person using you. And there are some people who come to my family group who are here today, they'll testify that. When people say you, I stop them right away. Because when you say you, it's very preachy. It's them versus us. So you have to speak in the first person. Now, some people stumble upon this continually after years, and I love just saying, no, I, and they go, well, nobody's going to want to share. I said, I don't care. You say I. But do I get like that? Yes. Okay. Yeah. But when you do say I, it changes it for you and for the listeners. Because we are, the difference is, with one little word, we reveal that we too are on a journey. We no longer are the authority on the subject, but a fellow seeker on the journey. It is people who impact the lives of people. A program can be a vehicle for which this takes place, and some are more conducive than others to help interactions and permit and foster such sharing. In all the groups that I do at church, the people who are present at that particular group are the subject and the purpose of the group. If you are there, the group is about you. You are the purpose, we are there, and you are the subject. I know there are exercises and games that try to foster these interactions. I worked in plenty of rehabs and psych hospitals, so I have experience and familiarity with many of them. Some are better than others, but in my personal experience, none of them are adequate in allowing someone to express what they are presently feeling, thinking, or going through more than an open group. Now, not everyone is able to facilitate such a group. Not everyone prefers that. Things can get very messy. But for me, it all goes back to the self. Some people like things neat and cleaned and packaged. I, on the other hand, like things raw, chaotic, and free-floating. Once everything is open and raw, I like to facilitate and process what happens and make sense of it for both myself and for the people engaged in the interaction, as well as the people who are silently observing. It works for me, but may not work for others. Each person needs to find what they'd like and do it. Too often, we look for the best packaged program, the popular circuit speaker, or the current, or the too often self-proclaimed experts that tell us what we need to do and how to do it. For most addicts, anything contrived or superficial seems not to pique their interest. If they are about gut-wrench honesty and about recovery, they will turn that off immediately. But there are also what I call the Gucci people. They're the ones who love superficial people and programs. It's an opportunity for them to talk superficially about what they think people want to hear in order for them to sound good and make everyone believe they are doing everything right. People just ooh, ah, all around, and they make a big fuss. And in my experience, I do not work too well with people like that. Too often, their recovery sometimes is superficial. Again, it comes down to knowing yourself and who and what works best for you and how people respond. In South Jersey and South Philadelphia, I have a reputation for working with the sickest of the sick. It's the name of our softball team, and our basketball are called the sickest of the sick. So, may the people that I work, the people that I know, the people who live with addictions, they respect real. If someone wants to minister to those living with addictions, there are some things I have learned about many who struggle with addictions. For one, they spot deception. They themselves are the masters of deception, but can spot it right away in others. At the same time, though, they are victims of it because they are virtually powerless in the face of self-deception that enslaves them daily. So while they respect a real person, that somebody who's not a fake person, they are both attracted to that, but then also repelled from an honest person if that person is going to call them on their stuff. I can't say some words in here. So if you're honest with them, expect a fight, because the defense of addicts are always building and is always operative. But if you can hang in there, you will find that after they take flight, they eventually return, if and only they perceive that you truly care about them. And I've had fights with some guys and girls in treatment programs. They were throwing everything at me, and I was right back at them, trust me. And everybody's like, ooh, ooh, ooh. When I facilitate, my role model is Jerry Springer. And the truth, it's the truth, you know, father, 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 so it's like, it gets you in there, But breaking down the denial of someone in his addiction is even more difficult at times, breaking down that of the loved ones it's a dangerous and tedious task when we're trying to break down the denial systems of the addict or the family member. And unless you're prepared for a long-lasting war, don't engage in short-lived battles. This is a war. It's not something where, let's go do an intervention on Johnny, and everybody gets in, you made me feel, and it's like, oh, no, this ain't it. It's not going to be over by the end of that night. We're talking years, lifetime, and people don't want to hear that. I remember, many times when send somebody to rehab and they come back and the parent's like, oh, thank God it's over. I'm like, what? It's just beginning. They look at me like, what are you, nuts? And we've had that family group, and they come in there, or what are you telling me? He went to rehab, he's done. We had one woman, her son came from rehab, she got him a limo with champagne to the casino for his birthday, because he got done rehab, yay! Oh, Maron. So it's, but we have fights, like with family members, like there was a family I was close to, a woman, her son had heroin, and we'd be in having a cup of tea or something, and I'd be like, he's high. And she's like, no, he's not, he's tired. I'm like, no, he's high. And he'd be like, shut the fuck up, you're always causing problems. And me and him would fist fight. He was 6 foot something. Outside, she'd lock the door on both of us. But, you had to be prepared for that. And one of the things I learned, too, there are some times you just don't want to fight. Like, so many times somebody's going to treatment, and the addicts are getting ready to go to treatment, and so they finally admit it, and then the parents say, who are you buying them off of? Where'd you go? Where'd you get them? How many did you do? I'm like, that's all irrelevant. The only thing that matters is from here on. Why are you trying to still fight? So, and then the addict says, you're the reason I use drugs. So I'm like, oh, God. But we must always keep in mind that beneath that bravado and the defense and the fighting, there's a very fragile human being under there. One who's filled with shame and fear and mistrust and insecurities, despite perhaps seeing in front of us someone who alleges and portrays pride, fearlessness, autonomy, confidence, and success. We laugh when guys get in recovery and they're like going down Florida and they're taking selfies and they look good, and the parents on the phone, he's doing great. What do you mean he's doing great? Oh, I saw selfies and he got real big. I said he took the needle out of his arm and put it in his. He's doing steroids now. Take it, great on the inside, hollow on great on the outside, hollow on the inside. And it never lasts. For addicts, the goal sometimes is to deflect and portray something to make you think they're doing well. But, you could tell when it's intrinsic, that when it's from the inside out. And they are great at making you think you are crazy. Don't buy it. Again, it's like the kid I was telling you about, me and him used to fight all the time. And I got done to, you're high. No, I'm not. You're crazy. I'm crazy, but you're still high. And we would fight and fight and fight. And I said, you used. No, I didn't. Yes, you did. Blah, blah. Then like a day later, a week later, a month, a year later, remember that fist fight you had? I broke your car, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I was so messed up. So I'm like, oh my God. So why don't battle? If you think they're high, don't battle for the urine, don't battle for this. Your eyes, your gut, that'll tell you. You don't have to go for I'm going to see if that's a urine test. I'm like, oh, he came out negative. Negative. He's nodding out. He's all this. He's not negative. Trust me. Well, he went in the bathroom and did his urine test. Oh, were you with him? No. Can you beat those things? Like, let me tell you, yes. So, but now if we get intimidated and want to believe them, it reinforces what I want to drive home, of knowing ourselves. Unless we are aware of what's happening inside of ourselves and are confident in our knowledge and wise enough to remember not to take any of this personal, there is the possibility that we can fold under pressure. When this happens, we buckle and succumb to the addict. We perpetuate the cycle of denial and deception. Co-signing all the BS is what they seek in order to let the demons remain victorious. So what we need to do is, the fear that, oh my God, they might be, oh my God, if I holler at him and have a fight, he's going to walk out and I'm not going to know where he's at and I'm going to worry all night because they're going to tell me I'm leaving the house and you don't want them to leave because you're going to worry. That's the mind game. You know, you have to be firm, you know. So when we talk about the war on drugs, let me tell you, we offer our service to those who suffer from this disease. It's truly a battle. It isn't like feeding the homeless who are hungry for food and somewhat grateful that they are receiving it. No, it's like trying to feed someone who doesn't want to eat. Despite their hunger for wholeness and their recognition of a need for assistance, it frightens the core of the addict to have to surrender. In reference to the addict, many have said the old adage, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. My theory is this: yes, I can't make it drink, but I can surely make it thirsty, okay? So if you've ever been to a bar, you may notice that they strategically place popcorn and peanuts around. Why? It isn't because they want to give something away. It's because they know if you eat them, that you will get thirsty. And then you'd start buying drinks. So the logical methodology that follows here is, how do you get the addict thirsty for recovery? Now, Keaton Douglas was up there. I thirst. Go to, she tells, she knows. It's a, by the way, a message from our sponsors. I went and visited with them. Great people. Great pro. It's not like a program. It's changing a culture. It's educating people about things that I said yourself. So I totally endorse I Thirst. And you know what there was a selling point? I found out Keaton Douglas, that name, she's really Italian. That made everything different for me. She had my favorite cookies, the pistachios. She had little Italian olives. She's eating them. I'm like, this is great. I don't even know. I didn't even listen to what she was saying. I was just eating the olives and cookies. It was great. I loved it. Continue doing it. So my answer would be, how do you get an addict to thirst? Allow them to experience the consequences. Take away their car, the phone, the place they live, the relationship, the job, the freedom, etc. Watch how thirsty they become and see the desperation set in and thus turn it into motivation and change. But again, unless we know who we are and have the foundation planted firmly on the ground, we may not be willing ourselves to risk the relationship in order to save the life. And I've seen that happen time and time and time and time again. I got a guy who comes family group. They'll know exactly who I'm talking about. Right? He comes in, his son's on methadone maintenance. He wonders, and he complains about him every week. What's he do? The guy's 41, he still lives at home. I said, Phil, you say that, I just gave him, well, say his name's Phil, all right. So I said, you complain every week. There's something you got to do. You complain about this maintenance program. You know what his maintenance program is? You. You're his domicile maintenance. You're his employment maintenance. You let him work with you in your shop. You complain about him. You let him live in your house. You complain about him. You're worse than the methadone. He was like, I don't think I like you anymore. I'm like, okay. But he keeps coming back. Everybody just suckers for punishment. I don't know. But that's what we got to do. Like, but he's paralyzed in fear that if he kicks his son out, he's going to die. You know, but that's where faith comes in. So what motivates us and sustains us is a continued decision to deny the ego and remain in the service of God and others. This is where it turns from self to service. Let me see how much time I got. Oh, wow. Okay, not that much time. I better hurry up. Blah, 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 blah. Okay. The reason I spent so much time on the self is because it is what we take in every relationship. Those who seek to work with those living with addictions and their families, it's critical that we know who we are, what our brokenness is, what triggers our emotions, and how we let go of the outcomes. We have to realize it's not about us, but about God and the other. Only then what happens, we can truly be of service. I'd like to review some of what I said in context of our purpose today and our desire to do some type of service to assist in crisis, what we face presently, what has taken the lives of too many young people. As I grow older and look back, I can clearly see at times I was operating out of my own needs as opposed to my desire to help. This isn't saying that during that time I wasn't able to help people in recovery in some way. People get what they get in or need despite our motives or our needs. At times, our shortcomings may even be an asset to the situation. The fact is, if I don't learn and grow by my experience, I risk becoming bitter, resentful, controlling, and angry. I need to continually discern what it is I do, why it is I do what I do. But if we have to wait to be 100% healthy and perfect to begin doing ministry, it would never start. So don't wait. Jump in. Don't feel like you have to be self-actualized in order to do ministry. You don't. Again, brokenness connecting to brokenness. So if we're not broken, we're not going to be able to connect with anybody. Our faults are our friends when we learn to recognize and laugh at them. We need to laugh a lot. What I've learned and continue to learn is that going through prayer and meditation, reflection and dialogue, I continue to grow when I am open to feedback and to be changed. Fixed and rigid people will find very little success or fulfillment in working with addicts. A person who believes that they are better than the addict, or one who believes they are going to tell the addict what they need to do, will only find misery and defeat. We need to let go and let God. Humility and recognition of our dependency on God is the key to the recovery process. Ego, etching God out in recovery, but we seek good, orderly direction, God. When I allow God to guide my actions, when I surrender to his will, love God, love neighbor, love self, and become in service to others, suddenly obsessions are lifted, life becomes manageable, and reasonable happiness is possible. Recently, I've been discerning the phrase God's will. We say it so often, but really, what is it? Is it anything that happens? Like, do we just say, oh, it's God's will? Having to preach funerals for so many young people and facilitate support groups for parents who lose children that have passed, I've come across myself questioning this a lot. Even my own struggles with grief, and I am uncomfortable sometimes in discerning for saying God's will be done. Because if God's will's taken so many of these young kids, I don't like, God, stop with your will already, you know? But I don't believe that God sits up there with a book deciding who he wants to live and who he wants to die. Nor do I believe that God frivolously created the world and isn't concerned about what happens. Yet I find it difficult to comprehend God being a micromanager that contemplates our actions as if he is playing chess, a game of chess with the devil. What I've come to understand is that most importantly, God created us in freedom. He gave us free will, which allows us to reject God's will, should we choose to. So that still begs the question, what is God's will? My belief is that Jesus' greatest command us, you shall love your neighbor as yourself and love God above all. God is love, and therefore love is his will for us. Living in love is compatible to surrendering to God's will. For if we truly love ourselves, we will not harm ourselves. If we truly love others, we will not harm them. And if we truly love God, we will remain in relationship with God. It is the trinity of humanity, God, self, and others. Lived out authentically, it is modeled after the trinity of divinity. If you look at the symbols of AA and NA, the triangle, God, self, others, service, freedom, those are the things that make this right. Because authentic relationships generate healthy outcomes. We cannot have authentic relationships without genuine integrity, which arises from a comfort with ourself that is established through recognition of our brokenness and the journey through healing. When we enter relationships with a self-awareness and esteem, it creates the likelihood of abuse, jealousy, envy, dependency, neediness, and using another, or it decreases. It decreases that likelihood. When we enter as more aware of ourselves, it decreases the likelihood of the negative things. But it also, if we don't, and we're not aware of ourselves, it increases the likelihood of those things happening. But we need to be aware of ourselves because then we will get fulfillment, equality, respect, boundaries, understanding, empathy, goodwill, and concern. The whole thus becomes greater than the sum of its parts. The two people in a relationship are better for having known each other and challenge one another to be the best self they are capable of being. Relationships that lead to love lead to God. And when I speak to young people in rehabs, they often have an instant aversion to the 12 steps because some of the people here are now anti-authority complex, and often the word God is mentioned in them. Most commonly, it's aversion to religion or angry at God for some events or circumstances in their past, such as the divorce of a parent, the death of parents, physical, emotional, or sexual abuse as a child, or as an adult, or what is perceived as a God who doesn't answer prayers. The notion of a higher power has become misunderstood and misconstrued by many people in the program. At least for me, it is difficult to conceive of a higher power being anything other than something human or divine, like not a chair or a clock. It can't be, because power requires energy. We know when we have a power failure, it's that the wires that transmit energy from one point to another have been severed. When we separate ourselves from God, we too live in darkness because we sever the relationship. To live in the light, we need to connect to the source of power, God. If you were like me, all right, you may have once turned on a lamp and it didn't work. So you went and changed the bulb. You put a new bulb. You went and turned it on, and it still didn't work. And you look around, and you realize it's not plugged in. So, yeah, if anybody identifies that, yeah, we've done that, right? So when we're not plugged in, we cannot give off light, and we do not attract others. We lose our way because we are in the darkness. If there is one other bulb in the room, at least we can see things. So if there are two or more people in the room, it's brighter, or bulbs. So if people are connected, now consider ourselves as bulbs, like our souls, our energy have light, that they're part of God. So if I'm with several people, that light is shining brighter than if there's nobody or nobody's connected. So if we're in a room with people who are connected, the more power, the more energy. Other people can be our higher power until we believe in God. And that's what I tell the guys and girls in rehab. Get with good people who are connected. They could be the light that leads you to the light. They're the lamp on the hill that shows you the true light on the hill. So another analogy that I use is the cell phones. How many of us go, oh, I only have 54%, I have 20%, we take our chargers, blah, blah, blah. All right? They're the most important things in our lives, you know? But how about our spiritual energy? When that's running low, do we get plugged in, or do we think there's another source of energy? God is the only connection that is relevant here. I broke down and bought a pair of these this week. Anybody know what these are? AirPods. They go in here, right? But I realized they told me is that these things charge when they go in here. It goes into two of them. And so I have to charge this. So you know what this is like a meeting. This is like church. When we go in there, we get charged because this thing connects to God. And so we can get charged not only from charging directly into God, but from being in a group that is charged itself. So see what purposes things are? Now it's made it worth it, right? This makes sense to young people, giving them something that they could believe in. But, you know, what's all this mean for our purposes to start a program? Let's get a little concrete. I know this isn't best practices, but I believe only with great difficulty will anything that any of us start will have effective results if it isn't grounded in God, in authentic people, and in the facilitation of developing intimate relationship in those seeking healing in their lives. The places where people come together to share their experience, strength, and hope have been the most effective means through which true conversion, change, and growth takes place. Many de jour programs have come and gone. I don't believe much of what I read, definitely about the latest research because it's funded by Suboxone doctors and pharmaceutical companies. I believe more what I experienced in the lives of people. I have met throughout my life, and more specifically the last 30 years, in addiction, recovery, and grief ministries, the people that have been my research. Those faces of boys and girls that have died, they have been my greatest teachers. And the other night in men's group, I asked them, I was coming here, and I said, what were the most important elements that help you? And they said relationships, relationship with God, relationships with people in these rooms. So they said it's the human interaction that changes most. More personally, I feel that my greatest strength is loving, being able to love, being able to be transparent, and being grounded in God. When those things happen, I'm effective. When they're absent in my life, I'm no good. I start to get in the way of the recovery rather than assist it. If we believe we are called to form bonds, all right, we need to be honest and sincere. You know, the three groups that I do, family group, bereavement group, and men's group, we're all honesty, human connections. You want a best practice? That's it. Be honest, know yourself, and desire relationships with other people that come into contact with us. One of the groups I do, my favorite group, is the Comfort Club. It's the parents who lost children. One night, one of the ladies came one week, the next week, and she said, after last week, she said, I went to work the next day after our last meeting, and I said, oh, my face hurts from laughing so hard last night. And they go, oh, would you go to a comedy show? She said, no, I went to my bereavement group for they went, what? And then she realized what it sounds like. And, you know, for people who've lost children, no, you wear a mask 24 hours a day to hide that pain, don't know, so to hide that. And when we're in a group, this group, the Comfort Club, we let that mask down. We laugh about the crazy stuff we do, we see, we think, because we, you know, it changes you. But if we didn't let down those masks and get to know each other, it wouldn't be effective. If I go in there and talked about grief and this and that, they would be bored out of their minds and leave. We need to make human connections. So in the end, know yourself, be yourself, let go of outcomes, be honest with others, stay connected to God, self, and others, form bonds, because they repair bad bonds, and remove things that get in the way of heart-to-heart communication. Never lose your sense of humor. And if you want to run a great group, always have somebody, an addict in there. It makes the dynamics much better. I do my family group. I would not do it if it were all parents. I'd run the other way because they're crazier than the addicts, no doubt. And it grounds them. And it's definitely, if it's an addict from another family, they can understand, a family can understand another addict so much better than it's their own kid. If your own kid, you're fighting, no matter what. Did you eat today? What do you mean, did I eat today? It's like, it's that fight. But when another family member, they can understand each other. So I'm going to shut up because I just can run my mouth too much. But thank you.